always distracted constantly. Our attention span is like less than a goldfish. For me, effective communication is not just about having your message, thinking about your target audience and then trying to reach it. It's about a two-way. It's not a one-way channel. It's about listening as much as speaking.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Season 4 of the Epic Podcast. Edric Poon and Company, the podcast where anybody can inspire everybody. As you can see over here, we're in Mojoideas, an awesome studio that we've managed to rent out, and these guys are helping me to up the production value for you. Now, as we explore Season 4, we're themed How to Be. We're going to be exploring job roles and positions that you've probably heard about, but you don't really know what they are. For example, how to be a voice coach or how to be a generational business owner. Now, we're going to be exploring this as we go on down the season. So thank you so much for listening or watching, and continue to support the podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Epic Podcast with me, Edric. And this week on our podcast, we're learning how to be a professional communicator. Now, what is that? Honest to goodness, I don't know. But I've enlisted the help of an expert over here to share a little bit more about what professional communications or being a professional communicator is all about. So I'd love to welcome Lisa Partridge of Sixcomms to the podcast. Welcome, Lisa.
Hello, Edric. It's a pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you for the invite.
I am very, very pleased to have you here because, again, when we planned this podcast out, first of all, I love what you do, but for the benefit of those who are listening or watching this right now, would you be able to share with us what Sixcomms is all about?
Well, Sixcomms is a communications consultancy. So basically, I help professionals become more effective communicators. So I offer one-to-one coaching or small groups or larger groups, even workshops. And things that we can focus on are things like presentation skills, pitching, anything to do with interpersonal communication, even writing as well, professional writing. So it's a wide spectrum, but the umbrella topic being a better communicator in the workplace. Yeah.
Well, I guess that's why I deemed you to be a professional communicator, because you're really teaching people how to communicate well professionally as well as on a professional level. So this is something that you found to be quite intriguing, I suppose, as a topic.
Yeah, I suppose the question, like this first question, I was like, I don't think I've ever actually described myself as a professional communicator, which is a bit of an interesting thing. It was a bit of a revelation to me. But I suppose if I'm in a networking event and somebody says to me, what do you do? I wouldn't naturally say, I'm a professional communicator. And that got me thinking a little bit, because I'm thinking, what does it mean actually? What does it mean to be a professional communicator now? Does it mean that we're communicating in a professional setting, or are we using it in terms of the adjective, the describing word, what it is to be professional? And I think recently, in the last few years, what with the pandemic and the way that we work has changed significantly, there's a bit of a blurred line in that, is like what it is to be professional even. So even taking away the communication part, it's like, well, how we show up, how we attend meetings, if that's in an online space over Zoom, of course, lots of our personal life and environment gets mixed in with that professional setting. So I think there is a bit of could I go as far as say, a bit of a confusion for a lot of people as to what it is to be even professional nowadays. So I don't know what you think about that, but that was something that came to my mind when you asked me this question.
Right. Well, when that question really came up, it's really about like, how do we even teach people communications? And I think that to communicate in itself is such a challenge, especially in this day and age, whereby we no longer just rely on face-to-face, but we have emails, we have text messages, we've got emojis, we've got, we've got GIFs, we've got stickers, all sorts of things, and even voice messaging, which doesn't necessarily bring across everything, right? That we want to, because we don't have all that body language that we can see either. So it really boils down to, and you know that this is very close to my heart, that I really do want to understand better what it is to be a communicator. So that in itself, the root question of that would be, what is communications? So in your opinion, to you, what do you deem as communications?
Yeah. So for me, I think a lot of us just presume that communication is, okay, this is my message and I want to get it to a target audience. And if I get that message across to a target audience, then that's effective communication. But there was that Bernard Shaw, that famous quote from Bernard Shaw. I'm going to have to refer to my notes because I can't remember.
Oh, she came prepared.
Bernard Shaw said the biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it's taken place. So I think a lot of the time we think our message has got across, but people are perceiving it in many different ways and they don't necessarily have the same understanding as you. So I think for me, effective communication is not just about having your message, thinking about your target audience and then trying to reach it. It's about a two-way. It's not a one-way channel. It's about listening as much as speaking.
Right. And that's the irony, right? When we are teaching someone or sharing these ideas with them, to get people to listen and to practice listening seems to be more difficult to me than it is to actually teach speaking skills.
Yeah. And I would say it's an interesting one because I think that we do focus a lot in our formal education and certainly at university level, presentations, doing group presentations, pitching something, trying to persuade someone of something. And it's all very focused on the speaker side of things. I don't know about you, but I can't remember ever in formal education sitting down with a facilitator and going through a listening exercise where you're just in a room with people and you're just facing someone like we are now, and we're not saying anything, but we're just listening and we're just looking at each other's body language, and you might say a few things and I'm just sat there really attentively listening and focusing on you 100% of the time. There was an interview a few months ago, I think, and your listeners could check that out perhaps as a resource. I don't know if you know a podcast called the CEO,
Diaries of a CEO.
Diaries of a CEO,
Right.
Sorry, thank you. And in one of his interviews, he interviewed a guy called Julian Treasure, who has done a TED Talk that's been seen by millions, and it's basically, he champions this idea that instead of focusing on speaking, we should really be focusing on the listening side of things. And I think that's true. I think a lot of conflict, a lot of disagreement could be resolved if we just took a moment to start listening a bit more intently. Yeah.
Right. And so professionals actually come to you, or do you actually approach professionals, which you, I'm sure, see in dire need of, right? And do they actually ask you, so what do you mean? You mean, what do you do? You talk for a living? Is that what they ask you? Because that's the idea of what communications is, right? Exactly what you're saying. It's just about talking, being an orator of sorts, but it's not about listening. So the basis of communications, right, in communications theory, as we know, it's the sender and the receiver, assuming that there's no noise, 100% of the message goes in, and 100% of the message is then received. But in this day and age, we are faced with more noise than ever.
Oh, yeah.
So that being said, how do you actually, talk to them about what you do? And let's identify the need first for this.
I've seen a lot of this quite recently, especially if you're working in remote teams and you're not in the same office physically as someone. Perhaps you're new to the organisation, and you're feeling very uncomfortable or not confident to really ask for what you need because you don't feel that connection with someone. So I think that's a particular challenge that I'm seeing quite often. So working with professionals and saying, okay, what do you know about the people that you work with? What channels of communication are you using? And you mentioned that earlier. It's kind of this idea of messaging and audio messages. It's not just being in a room sitting down with someone anymore. A recent client I had, she said that her, and I was quite shocked by this, but I'm sure it happens more than not, that all their communication is done over Slack.
Oh my.
I mean, and they have a weekly meeting in person, but that's not always fully attended by everyone in the team. So she's got a weekly meeting, she's got Zoom calls throughout the week, but not necessarily with everyone. But most of the time, the communication is just through Slack.
Which is purely on just text messaging, basically.
It's just text
It's an
messaging,
IM, yeah.
and it's not even email. So even this, we still obviously use email a lot, but we're moving away even from email as our main communication channel. So that in itself throws up so many more challenges for people. So working with her, it was about how can you make the most of your time when you are in a room with somebody or you are in a Zoom call with someone and with your team. Like, what can you do to ensure that connection is built and you absolutely squeeze every opportunity out of those meetings, because that's the only opportunity that you can really connect with that person.
Right. I realize you have to be highly alert to be able to do that, because while we're talking, we also have to watch for somebody's body language. And when they respond, you're listening to them. At the same time, while we're listening, I mean, I'm just trying to dissect this in the tiny little brain that I have, that we really need to also identify, like what you mentioned, those opportunities to go, hey, this could have been an opportunity for me to bring this up, to recognize, to create awareness of something, or to create an anchor point for the next the next conversation moving forward, or even just to shift the topic if we need to. Do you think that this kind of thought process can really be trained?
It's a really good question. And I'm kind of reluctant to make
It's not arbitrary.
promises.
Yeah, it's not
like
arbitrary,
say,
yeah.
oh, well, if you attend X amount of hours of training, you're going to be able to do this, this, and this. And it's just not realistic.
Yeah, snake oil's over there, thanks.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, there's a myth out there that you can teach communication. I think that's a myth, actually. I think you can give people tools and frameworks and techniques. You can impart and share your lived experience. But unless you pick up those tools and those frameworks and you really get very curious about yourself and how you show up as a communicator, and you practice those tools and techniques in real life scenarios, and you do that repeatedly with lots of self-reflection, that might lead to behavior change. But effective communication will only happen, or you'll shift your effectiveness as a communicator when you have practiced and you've reflected on what's gone well and what hasn't gone so well. And more than that, why hasn't it gone so well? What could have been the factors? But a lot of the time, and I've recently said this to a client who was struggling with her confidence, is you need to at some point let go of this idea that you can control what other people do or think or say or feel in any given time. We can't control what others feel about us. We can control how we show up to a conversation. We can control our intention, and we can control some of the tips or the tricks or the techniques that we can use to help us get through that conversation. But then it's up to the other person. You can't control everything. Yep. And I think a lot of the time we try to control everything, but there's so many layers of complexity. Someone turns up to a conversation, you don't know the backstory. You don't know, like today, for example, I might have had some kind of argument just before I walked out of the door with my child, and I was carrying that with me for the whole taxi journey up to this interview. I'm not saying that happened, but we don't know the backstory. We don't know what people are feeling at any given time unless we go into a conversation with one of the 6 pillars of my business, which is the 6 C's of effective communication, which is curiosity. If I show up and I'm genuinely curious and I want to find out more and I want to try to understand where someone's coming from and I'm open to that, then I believe 9 out of 10 times that communication will be successful.
You mentioned that you have 6 C's, and the first one is curiosity, which is awesome because it's true. I mean, as we're doing this podcast, right? That's the reason why we do it. I mean, you've got your own Sixcomms podcast, and a big part of it is truly asking the right questions. Well, I won't say asking the right questions, but rather asking questions with the right intent and direction, and being very deliberate with what we're trying to find out, with genuine curiosity, and that creates a lot of depth in the conversation itself. You have 5 more C's. Would you mind? Now you got me curious. Okay, what are the 5 C's? I mean, of course, in Singapore, please, we've moved away from those 5 C's. But what are the 5 C's that you have in your company then?
Yeah, I've been here in Singapore long enough to know the 5 C's that you're talking about, but it's not that.
Thank goodness, please.
I think of the 6 C's that I believe in 2 groups of 3. So in the first group, I've got connection, curiosity, and compassion. And in the second set of 3, I've got clarity, customization, and consistency. And when I say I put those into 2 groups, it's not that I don't think that they interlock, because I think they are kind of friends with each other. There's connection between all of them. It's interesting, though, because I've been running Sixcomms now for a couple of years. And the last podcast guest that I interviewed on my podcast, they must have said about 3 or 4 other C's that I was thinking, oh, yeah, I like that. I like that one. So since I've had the business, it's like I reckon I could probably have 10 or more C's. So there's been like confidence, care, courage. These are great words as well. But those are the 6 that I've kind of decided on to go forward. And they all interconnect, as I said. But I think what is overarching all of them is what I was mentioning before, which is this idea of attentive listening.
I've always found it to be a challenge to go into that, especially when we have a shorter attention span due to maybe certain media that we subscribe to, or certain, again, a lot of distractions, a lot of noise that we have around us. But when it comes to attentive listening, one way is that, when we did study communications, to be an effective and responsible communicator, it's always been that the responsibility is on me as the sender to make sure that the receiver receives 100% of the message. So if I lose your attention, the onus is on me. Means I haven't been captivating enough. That's one more C for you if you wanted to. Yeah. So do you think that that's really the case, or are people truly lacking attentive listening?
Okay, so I think it's a 50-50 type thing.
Right,
because,
it's a give and take, right?
Yeah, because it's a 2-way thing. And if I'm showing up to an important meeting, a professional meeting, then I would hope and I would assume that we're going in with some kind of base level of listening. Like, I would assume that hopefully we're going into a Zoom meeting, having kind of closed the door, made sure that everyone else that maybe is in the space knows that I'm now going into a meeting and I'm not going to be available for an hour. I would hope that they're putting their phone somewhere away. They've turned off their notifications so that emails aren't pinging every 2 minutes. So that there are some levels of practical things that I can do to ensure that I can have undivided attention for that meeting. I would deem that as kind of a base level professionalism. And then as a speaker, if I'm the one that's presenting, if I'm working with you, I can give you some tips on how you can show up on a video camera and be a bit more not entertaining, but more engaging. Like you can see now I'm using my hands and I can't help it. I can't really sit very still when I'm communicating. And I think that that's really important in Zoom, is to like, use your non-verbal language as well. Smile. Look as though you're happy to be there and meet the other people in the room or the space.
I love what you say. Look as though. It's the whole fake it till you make it kind of thing. Even if you're having the shittiest of days, just smile and wave.
Yeah, because don't get me wrong. I'm not a great lover of the fake it till you make it thing,
Right.
because I don't like that. I'm not a keen lover of buzzwords, but the other buzzword is authenticity, is showing up authentically, whatever that means. That's another topic. But
I can see you cringing already.
I know. I just think some of these words are so overused, it like becomes really difficult to put your finger on what they actually mean anymore. But let's be real. Life is going on. Lots of things happen. A lot of people are going through really tough times, challenging times, and have been for a few years, and are still feeling the effects of that. So it would be unrealistic to say that every meeting you show up to, you're raring to go and you really want to present. And I'll be honest, sometimes I'll show up to workshops and I'm not feeling 100%, but I know I've got to facilitate a group of 10 people and have objectives and get them to a certain point where they've practiced certain tools or techniques, but I might not necessarily be feeling it, but I've got to kind of psych myself up for that conversation. And yeah, there probably is a little bit of smiling before you like get on the call, and doing a bit of like breath work and reading your positive affirmation for that day, or whatever you need to do to get into the right frame of mind. And I think we would be dishonest if we said that that doesn't happen. I've actually whittled on so long I've forgotten your question.
Well, it means that we're having a really good time now. So, but that being said, I think we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. And we're going to be discussing a little bit more about some of the tips that we can get from Lisa to improve our own communications, and also deep dive into what teams are really missing right now in their communications and how we can help. All right, we'll see you in a bit. And we're back with Lisa from Sixcomms, the professional communicator who kind of refuses to accept the term of professional communicator.
I haven't refused. I just
Still
haven't.
you just haven't accepted it either.
I haven't accepted it either.
Slightly perplexing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, okay. So, enough waffling about this, but we honestly, earlier on, we were just chatting about, some days we don't feel it and we still got to perk ourselves up. You mentioned a few things like reading your own positivity and all that, and or your affirmations, and even smiling in the mirror if you need to, which seems a little off, but I mean, for some. But there is there is scientific proof of this, right? That your physiology does affect your mood. And I think, I'm not sure if you came across this, but it was in Japan, they had laughter clinics that you're forced to laugh.
Yeah,
have you heard of something like that?
Yeah, I've heard of like laughter therapy. Things that come to mind is like, I don't know, in like Hong Kong, in the parks or something. I read somewhere that they have like aunties and uncles just laughing, gathering and laughing. And apparently it's supposed to be some kind of therapy.
Right. Do you include that in your workshops?
No, but who knows? You never say never. If things get that bad, you might need to take a moment to have a bit of a laugh. But having said that, humour. I mean, I use it. I use humour quite a lot. And in fact, the organisation I used to work for, we had multiple workshops happening at the same time, and we realised that the walls were quite thin, and I used to get complaints from other trainers because apparently I was having too much fun with my participants because they'd got a bit rowdy and laughed too loudly. And for me, that's a win. I mean, if the participants in the workshop are having that much fun that they're disturbing other workshops, all good.
Right. Yeah. And because you help a lot of teams, I'm just wondering whether or not you can give out some tips of how a team lead would be able to prep themselves, let's say, for example, if they needed to give a briefing and they're really not feeling it? What do you think they could do?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, especially where you're doing the briefing. So say you've got a specific room where you sit at a particular desk with your laptop, don't go there. Don't go into that environment. So try to take yourself away if you can, even if it just means, going down near to where you live in a green area, walking around, trying to think of something else. Just that movement, or making yourself a cup of tea or coffee, sitting in a different environment, a different space, and then just taking a moment. And I think it's like it's not one size fits all. So like when you said about, smile before you go into meet, some people feel really uncomfortable doing that. It doesn't work. Some people don't want to go outside. They don't want to go too far away. They want to make sure that they're settled. They might want to get onto the call 10 minutes before it actually starts. They might want to arrange for a colleague to come into the Zoom call before everybody else joins, just having a conversation with them about what they did at the weekend to relax them before they have to meet everybody else. It's just trying to find those ways that puts you into a different frame of mind. And yes, I think it was a few years ago, there was a lot of talk about positive affirmations helping people, but not everyone subscribes to that either.
You're right. I don't. I'm very self-deprecating.
And find it very, very awkward, and it almost makes it worse. But others, like myself, who incidentally did an experiment, and for about 6 months, every week, took a positive affirmation card randomly from a pack of positive affirmation cards and photoed it. Took a photo of it. Sorry, my English. Wow.
It's become your second language, huh?
Took a photo of it and then WhatsApped it to friends and family, and had that as my positive affirmation for the week. So if I was ever in a situation where I wasn't feeling it, I would read that aloud. I shared it with other people so that they could pick it up. And I did this consistently. So I would do that on the Monday. The Friday, I would reflect how it went. And then I'd do that, I think it was for about a period of 6 months. I can honestly say it did help me. It did help me. But I think with all of these techniques, these tips, these tricks, it's being open enough and curious enough to try them. If they work for you, great. But you've also got to give them a chance as well. You've also got to do it with, and that's my other C, with some consistency. Because unless you try and do that over a prolonged period of time, you're not necessarily going to know whether it's of benefit to you or not. So giving things a chance.
Right.
Yeah.
And in your experience so far, when it comes to the teams that you're coaching or you're facilitating, what have been the biggest pain points to why they are either not communicating as well as they should, or perhaps just not feeling it?
I think that so to answer the not feeling it type of energy is, we're supposed together and we're in a team, but we don't necessarily know much about each other. So it's difficult to have those work conversations when we don't feel that we're connected on a human level. And it sounds really obvious, but knowing about somebody's background, knowing that they have a family, knowing that, a little bit, not to be intrusive, but knowing a little bit about their background and where they've come from and what experience they have and what kind of communication preference they have as well. How many times have I heard clients say, well, I email this and I ask for this information, but I'm not getting what I need the time that I need it. So a lot of the time I find that just by asking some very simple, what would seem almost very basic questions, save you a lot of time and energy and heartache. For example, okay, in order for me to get this information to you, what channel do you prefer that I use? Would that be good for you in a short WhatsApp message? Would you like me to send you a quick email? Or is that better if I just picked up the phone and made a call to you? And I think I mean, we say that we have all these communication channels available to us. I mean, we can list them, can't we? Teams, Zoom, Slack, you name it, we've got it. But a lot of the time, people have a preference.
And
And
dare
if you
I
don't,
say that many people don't even realize their preference.
Exactly. Yes, that's a good point. And also, yeah, being very, because it all starts with yourself. So I would say 90% of the challenges come from just not noticing or not being observant or not reflecting. And so it starts with the self. It's like, actually, what do I prefer? Do I prefer to sit in a room with somebody and have that chat? How do I prefer to get and receive feedback? Have I really talked to my manager about what I prefer? Does he know that? Or am I just expecting him to know that and read my mind? And that's not fair. Sometimes we just need to be bold and brave and say, look, this isn't working for me. But if you sent all of that information in an email before we had the meeting so that I had some time to prepare, I would prefer that. And so is that something that you could accommodate? So just setting some parameters around how you would like to work and setting some boundaries. And that requires quite a level of open honesty to yourself to say and to recognize that, oh, this is really frustrating me, but go that step further and say, well, why is that frustrating me? And what could I ask them to do that would make that situation better, that would become less frustrating?
That is very true.
Yeah.
And when this happens, right, let's say, for example, they do reach a frustrating point in time, it's so amazing how people in general will regress back to its original state of, this person just doesn't get me, or this person doesn't get it. And there was a wonderful survey that I saw, and I think that this should be applied to everyone and every organization to understand. Do you know how long it takes to forge a relationship with someone, just as a casual friend?
Oh, it's probably something like 5 to 10 positive interactions with them.
Interesting that you're saying that. The study that was done suggests that it is going to be 50 to 80 hours of felt engagement.
Yeah.
50 to 80 hours. So if you think about it, right, how much time do we spend in the office? How much time do we spend with our colleagues? Now, felt engagement doesn't mean I'm sitting next to you and, we're doing our work. Felt engagement is this, having real conversations with people, spending time with them. And if you think about it, people are like, okay, I want this team to come together in 3 months. Like 3 months, how many hours is that of felt engagement? That would be 3 solid months of felt engagement, which means we shouldn't be doing work. We should be out there playing with each other and doing sports or going out outings. But that's not the truth. So companies in general as well, and we ourselves as people, give up too early. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I think what you're saying there is really you're building deep connections with someone.
And that's just for a casual friend. You're not even talking about really deep things. So 50 hours of that just to make a friend in the office, so to speak. It's a long time, but I don't quite. So I really hope that this message can be pushed out more, a little bit more, so that we can be more patient with ourselves and giving toward others in terms of our time, in terms of our focus and our engagement.
Yeah. And of course, like going back to the original question, what is effective communication? That basic question. Well, it is all centered around, based upon trusting the other person. And I mean, we're talking about casual connection. How long does it take for people to feel that they really trust their team? They really trust their manager. They really trust that he or she has got their back in all cases, in all situations. How often do we go into a Zoom meeting or a team meeting and feel that we can say anything that's on our mind and feel safe to do that? And I think that takes a lot. That takes a lot of engagement and a lot of building and developing slowly but surely over time. And the other thing I think I find quite a lot of is the frustration that people don't speak in meetings, or they don't feel that they're engaged, or they're asking questions, or just not really vocalizing their ideas or their thoughts. And so the other area I think that's really important is for managers to really recognize the kind of the personalities that are in their team. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What do they prefer? And then this whole, introvert, extrovert, ambivert kind of label. I mean, I'm not so into labels because I think sometimes we get stuck in the label. But certainly I think it's good to have a general awareness of what people prefer, because I'm the team member who sits and doesn't say a lot.
Okay.
And I've had feedback, personally in a professional environment that said, oh, why don't you speak up more? You've obviously got a lot to contribute, but we never hear from you. That's not that I don't have anything to contribute. It's that I need more time to process my ideas. And then when I feel comfortable having had that one-on-one time or that individual time, I can then come back and share. But I need that time to process. And other people will be thinking out loud and don't need that time, and they're able to share and contribute in the moment. But it doesn't mean that the quieter ones don't have anything to contribute. But
Right.
you as the manager or the effective communicator has to find ways to facilitate conversations that include everyone. And don't make assumptions that just because those people aren't talking, they don't have ideas. So that's where my C, compassion, comes in. It's about being compassionate that not everyone is going to have the same style.
Right. It's going to take a lot of work to identify those things. And when we did some work on the MBTIs with the whole extrovert and introvert thing, extroverts just need to speak off the cuff quickly, want to just blurt out the answers as quickly as they can, right? Because that's how they process that's how they best operate and brainstorm, right? Introverts, on the other hand, is what you've mentioned, would then want to take some time by themselves to be able to be quiet and process the thoughts, and it takes time for them to speak up. The scary one is that when managers most managers technically are extroverts, or I always say that corporates do tend to favor extroverts a little bit more, and they take on a management role. That's when they go, okay, so anybody want to say anything? And no, go around the table. No. Okay, well, the extrovert, by the time they could process that, is like, okay, meeting's over. Sorry, I missed it. I missed the boat. So in this case, right, like with the multiple forms or mediums of communication that we do have at our disposal, has there ever been a ranking to which is best and which is the least effective?
What, in terms of if you're an introvert or an extrovert?
No, regardless, just as a communicator.
Not that I'm aware of.
I'm just wondering,
It's a good thing to kind of go out and research, I suppose. But I think managers have to be open to the idea that they're going to have a mixed bunch. Not everyone's going to be an extrovert, not everyone's going to be an introvert, and you're going to have those in between, like I am. Apparently, I'm an ambivert, so I sit right in the middle. Mm-hmm. So how I can help those managers is by going in and saying, well, how do you facilitate your meetings? So going back to what you just said, what do you think, everyone? And that's a question to the whole group. And then we're waiting for everyone to contribute. As you've quite rightly recognised, that is my nightmare as an ambivert, or more on the introverted side. So small groups, break them up into small groups. How do you collate the data? Just having a bit more thought and intentional design in how you are actually running those meetings, so that you do get that data back, and it's not always the loudest voices that are being heard.
Right. And at the same time, sometimes the loudest voice tends to be rewarded, which kind of feeds the cycle a little bit more, doesn't it? So it really does go back to the point you made at the start of the podcast, which is active listening. Now, for those who don't understand active listening, because, I'm sitting here with my eyes open, I'm looking at you and I'm kind of listening. Is that active listening?
Well, the fact that you've said I'm kind of listening tells me that you're not actually 100% listening. And I notice you've looked at your phone a couple of times.
Yeah, because I gotta refer to some notes. I'm not great at this. I'm not great at this job, you know.
But yeah, I mean, active listening, the key is in the active part. So I think people assume, okay, I listen. Oh, okay, I just sit back and I listen. Well, no, actually, there's a lot going on to really be attentively listening to someone. So all the time you're like, you're scanning, you're looking, your eye contact, you're looking at the facial expressions, you're looking at the body language, you're looking at how many times you look at your phone. You're
really calling me out on that, huh?
No. But it's like, you have to be actively engaged in the process. And of course, we're all human. Sometimes that, our mind wanders. But if we are really in the zone of listening, we are there to try to understand the other person. We're not there to think about our reply or our next question. And I think you're going to relate to this because we're both podcast interviewers. The thing that I find really difficult as a podcast interviewer is knowing that I've got a set of questions, like you are because you keep referring to your phone, but being present for the person as they're speaking and not trying to go ahead too much, just thinking, okay, we've got about 5 minutes left of this podcast interview. I've got 2 questions left on my guide. But also I need to be focusing in and listening, because if I don't, I might miss a gem of an information that I could then leverage and use. And maybe those questions would have changed, because it was such a useful piece of information. So it's about being very present, being focused, letting someone speak, but also clarifying. If you have wandered off, being honest enough to say, just want to check, I think you said this, was I correct? Well, that's a good active listening tool. It's to show the person that you care, that you want to make sure that you've understood them correctly. It's not just about sitting there nodding and saying, right, okay.
Those are great tips right now. So that being said, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much. Now we're going to off for a short break. I'm going to take a little bit of time to reflect on my wrongdoings. Right, with Lisa, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about the Sixcomms podcast when we come back. And we'll see you in a bit. And we are back. Sixcomms podcast. Tell us more. What is it all about, and how can people go listen to it?
Okay, so the Sixcomms podcast, Sixcomms is the name of my business. As I've said, it's based on the 6 C's of effective communication. So basically, Sixcomms Podcast offers professionals like practical tips and techniques that they can use to help them communicate better in the workplace. And it's really about digging deeper into what those 6 C's really mean. How do they show up? So what does it mean to connect? How can you connect better with your teams, especially in a remote world that we're living in? How can we do that with a bit more compassion? So bringing in things that we've already spoken about here, like preferences, different channels, whether you're an introvert, extrovert. So yeah, it's really digging down on curiosity. How do we ask open, curious questions? And it's looking at lots of different angles. So we've talked about multi-generational communication. We've talked about how can we flip what presentation means. So I think there's like this idea that a traditional presentation is you stand up in front of a load of people, or you're online and you're doing all the talking and everybody's just listening to you. Well, how can we make that a bit more engaging? How can we kind of bring the audience into that and connect with them rather than making it just about one person?
Well, engagement doesn't necessarily mean interactivity, right?
I think making a presentation include the audience and getting their contributions so making that interaction more explicit does help engagement. I think if you're like going back to what you said earlier, which is we're always distracted constantly, our attention span is I think now, like less than a goldfish, wasn't it? It's been found recently. It's like less than a
that's
goldfish.
so
It's like
sad.
really sad. So now I'm thinking like the way we view presentations really has got to change. We can't be getting people standing up on their own and for an hour, 2 hours, and assuming people are going to be engaged or listen to the topic. I mean, I struggle to concentrate for 20, 30 minutes. And I'm not alone. I think, get me on a Zoom call for an hour and it takes me another hour to just recover from it.
That is true. Like,
It's like-
whenever you have an opportunity to like put your camera off, and I mean, honest to God, you know what you're doing behind the camera, right? And when it's off, you're like, yeah, I'm fiddling with my phone. I'm looking somewhere else. I'm just like, oh, good God, can this end?
Yeah. So how can you expect people to show up to a presentation, like what we deem in the traditional sense of that? Surely that's got to be more of a two-way conversation. So I've realized in the last 6 months, a year, I'm kind of on a bit of a mission to kind of change that whole idea of you walk into a room or a networking event and there's a speaker. Or we all sit in lines and we listen to a speaker, to the expert in the room. Another word I dislike, expert.
Okay,
Because
so
I don't think we're an
I'll
expert.
bleep it out in post
Yeah.
if you want.
But we're not. I'm not. I would never call myself an expert.
Others might.
Others might, and that's their right. That's
Okay.
their choice. But I don't call myself an expert. And if I stand up in a room, I don't want eyes looking at me as an expert, because then that means that there's a power shift. So I become the one with all the power and all the answers. And I've had many a workshop where people have come and said, I want to do a 1-day workshop and I want to be able to do this. And you're going to almost give me a magic pill to do this. By the time I've come to your workshop, by the end of it, I will be able to write an email perfectly to
Well,
anyone in my
Is
organization.
that seriously what some people would
Some
demand?
people think that just going to a workshop or just doing a number of hours of training is a magic pill for them to
Wow.
then go out and be better and to have that good appraisal and that good feedback from their manager.
And then how do you actually realign this delusion?
Well, you're honest and you say, well, this is going towards that journey. But I can say that I've been in this communication world for many, many years. I would say I'm quite an accomplished communicator, but I'm going to give my age away now, but at 42, I'm nowhere near ending the learning journey. I'm not a perfect communicator. And if anyone says they are not telling the truth, because I think communication, being an effective communicator, is a lifelong journey.
Absolutely, especially with the I think the shift as well with the younger generation that's going to be coming up, the way that they communicate, the way that they consume media, and the way they're going to be expressing themselves. It's going to be extremely different from how I suppose we did when we were growing up. In that sense, are you able to transit through that? Are you also picking up new things regarding that that particular communicating with that generation?
Yeah, I think it's about, as I said, it's not about me standing up and being like, I'm older than you, and so therefore I'm wiser than you, and I have more experience than you, and so I'm going to advise you to do this, this, and this. It's much more of a, let's just sit down, have a coffee, let's have a chat, conversation, and just lose all of that, the ego. Just lose the ego and just talk to someone on a level and say, well, I'm going to tell you what I did in that situation. But quite frankly, the landscape now is totally different. It's changed in the last 5 years, never mind the last 20 years. So I can tell you what I did in those similar situations. You might be able to use the same principles or tools or thinking that I had. But you've also got to bring your own stuff to the table, and I need to be open to learn from you. We've got this generation of TikTok now.
Shocking.
I try, but I can't get into it.
I know nothing about it. I still don't have an account, and I don't know. You can call me a boomer all you want. It's fine. My son calls me a boomer, by the way.
Oh, boomer.
Yes,
Nice.
I'm a boomer. Yes. Proud to be one, I suppose. Though I'm not a boomer, technically speaking, right? But they just call. My first experience with being called a boomer was about 7 to 8 years ago. We had an intern that comes in, and we were just discussing. Okay, we're gonna do a little bit of Facebook marketing. What do you all think? Blurted right out, no filter whatsoever. Facebook's for boomers. I'm like, whoa, oh wow, okay. So you've just probably riled up the feathers of every old turkey inside this office right now. We're all boomers now, gobble gobble.
Yeah.
So it's insane, right? But the truth is, we have to move and accept it. And of course, we laugh, right? While we accept it to hide the pain.
Yeah.
But we do.
Humor helps in
Yes.
those situations.
Of course. But the point being that we got to be as open as we can to, like what you rightly mentioned, and I completely agree with that. The question is, how do we actually kind of really speak to a younger person and go and actually have that humility, and I suppose really put that ego aside and go, can you teach me what this means? What this is? Help me understand.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's about just you putting your student hat on again, just like completely. Like you might have an idea in your mind of where you think they should go, but just saying, look, this is new to me. How about we switch roles? You teach me something.
I thought you were about to say, you be the boomer. You be the boomer now, and let's see how you feel. Suck it.
But I think sometimes it just requires a different approach and a conversation.
Actually, that's a really good workshop, right? If we took two groups together and just let them role play. The younger one, what's their impression of a boomer? And we'd be like, are we really like that? Do we really act like that?
The truth hurts.
Oh my God, seriously. It's like, oh, my back hurts. Oh yeah, okay, I got that one. Yeah, that's fine. What's up next in your podcast? What are you going to be exploring further? And give me a couple of themes that we can look forward to.
So I've just recorded a couple of things. Like one of them was around negotiating. So even myself, I put my student hat on for this one, because the art of negotiating also now as a business owner as well, that kind of has taken on a new meaning for me as well. So I speak to a very experienced negotiator and sales coach.
Dare you say expert?
No, I don't say expert. Actually, I don't describe any of my guests as experts.
Thought I could catch her there. Never mind.
We talk about the art of negotiating, which basically is more about, again, being open and curious and inquiring. It's not really about selling per se. It's about how you're building that relationship over a period of time. Are you doing that work? Are you adding to, I think it was Stephen Covey that said about adding to the emotional bank account, If you put enough into a relationship, you'll get to that stage where it's got to be about, okay, so what price, that it's like at the pinnacle, the peak of the negotiation, but it doesn't feel uncomfortable. It's just a natural thing because you've done all of that relationship building, the legwork before. So that was an interesting one. The art of negotiating is coming up. And then I'm just trying to think, put me on the spot now. Who else I've just interviewed?
So your guests probably don't listen to this, so it should be fine. Nobody's insulting, right?
No, I've just kind of gone really blank.
Okay, we'll move on. But honestly, the art of negotiation really does sound fantastic, and I'm looking forward to that because, again, plenty of learning that, and I love the medium of podcasting. It's really the best thing. It's really the best thing since sliced bread. I really do. I'm very, very passionate about this medium because, again, it's the only medium that's available right now that you can truly go deep with any topic, with anything, right? From coffee making to beer drinking to just tabloid-ish nonsense, right? That can all come up, but you can still go in depth because of the medium. You're not going to find many YouTube videos that will go an hour or so just to go in depth into a topic and be as free flowing as this. I still believe that podcasts are great. So that being said, I'm wishing you all the success for your podcast, and continue to please keep pushing out this amazing content for everybody else to consume. How can anybody get this podcast, please?
Well, you could go to the website that has all the episodes on, which is sixcomms.org, and it's on Apple and Google and Spotify and all of the available platforms. And it's just the Sixcomms Podcast, and it will come up. Yeah.
All right, cool. So everybody, please go check out the Sixcomms Podcast. Now, before we end the podcast today, what we always do with our guests is a rapid fire 10 questionnaire. So that being said, are you ready?
Well, no, I'm not, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll take it that you are. All right. Question number 1. One word you love the most.
Connection.
One word you dislike.
Expert.
If you could have a conversation with anybody, dead or alive, fictional or non-fictional, who would that be?
Nobody's going to know this, I don't think, but Priya Parker. She's an amazing facilitator in the US, and she's got a great book called The Art of Gathering.
Okay. Well, at least one person in this studio knows.
Oh, do you? Do you know?
It would be you.
Oh, okay.
What do you say to yourself every morning?
There are so many answers going off in my head right now, but not appropriate. It's a beautiful sunny morning.
That is the most PC answer ever.
I know.
Oh my God. Seriously?
I know. I got
Oh my God. Why do we even do this? Now, name one superpower that you like to have.
that can listen. I can listen like from a distance. What do you call that?
It's like super hearing. Like,
Super hearing. Yeah.
What Superman and Supergirl?
Like I can hear everybody. Well, not everybody's conversation. That would be a bit annoying. But from a distance, I could hear what was going on in the room before I enter it.
Right. Okay. So it's like anti-deafness. I suppose.
That doesn't sound so superhero-ish, but we'll go with it.
Yeah, it's like anti-aging almost, if that's the case, right? All right. Favorite dish to eat?
That's tough because I like a lot of different things. But on a rainy, cool day in Singapore, which we've been having for the last few days, mee soto.
It's reaching dinner time, so I guess I'm getting a little hungry. Favorite travel spot or the next one you want to go to?
I just refuse to answer favourite travel spot because I've lived in many different countries and they all got their pluses and minuses. But the next travel spot we are going to go to is Morocco to see my husband's family. So I really am looking forward to seeing other parts of Morocco that I haven't seen before. Something
in the arts that you've always wanted to do but yet to do so?
I don't know if this is the arts, but there is like a little ambition to do a TED Talk.
Well, what does retirement look like to you?
I don't think I'll retire.
How do you want to be remembered? What's your legacy?
That I was kind, that I was compassionate, and that I listened.
All right. Okay, you can take that deep breath again because we are done with the the questionnaire. Well done. You've survived the 10 questions. And again, thank you so much for being here. I hope you had a great time as much as I did on this podcast. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, Lisa Partridge, Sixcomms. Go ahead, check it out, Sixcomms Podcast, as well as the website on sixcomms.org. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Thank you so much.
That being said, all right, Lisa, it's been a pleasure. Well, we're out. Bye.